What does the past look like? We see it in faded maps and antique drawings, but now we can step into it. This is New York, but not as you know it. This is the 1660s, a precarious, bustling, muddy port on the edge of a vast continent. A commodity town run for profit, defended by a crumbling wall and populated by dreamers. Soldiers, enslaved people, and traders from across the globe. This is NIU Amsterdam, and for the first time, with the aid of AI historical reconstruction, we can walk its crowded lanes, smell its air, and witness the volatile beginning of the city that never sleeps. Join me as we travel back to the island of Manhattan over 3 centuries ago. Our journey begins from the water, the lifeline of the colony. Imagine gliding across the East River in a shallow draft sloop. The view that greets you is not a skyline of stone and glass, but one of wood. The shoreline is a ragged collection of docks, warehouses, and jetties, all built from rough-hewn timber, stained dark by the sea and weather. The air is a complex bouquet, the sharp, clean scent of the sea, undercut by the pungent odor of fish, wet hemp from rope making, and the distinct, warm smell of beaver pelts from the fur presses. Dozens of ships are moored or anchored, their masts a leafless forest against the sky. You hear the cry of gulls, the shouted polyglot commands of sailors Dutch, German, English, Algonquian, and the constant creak of ropes and timbers. This harbor is the beating heart of New Amsterdam, the sole reason for its existence. Every hope, every commodity, every threat arrives by these gray-green waters. Stepping onto the stone quay near the tip of the island, your eyes are drawn to the colony's stark center of power, Fort Amsterdam. It's less a majestic castle and more a stubborn, squat fortress of dirt, brick, and stone. Its cannons, grim and practical, point out to the harbor mouth. The walls are formidable, but the state of disrepair is palpable. We see cracks patched haphazardly, and the earthen ramparts are soggy. This is the seat of the Dutch West India Company and the Director General Peter Stuyvesant. His residence is here, a relatively fine house for the frontier. Just outside the fort's gates lies a flat, open field, the Bowling Green. Here, soldiers drill, children play, and cattle sometimes graze. It's a space of both ceremony and mundane daily life. Standing here, you feel the tense duality of the place, the rigid, profit-driven order of the company, imposed upon a chaotic, growing settlement that is constantly straining against its control. Turning onto Pearl Street, named for the troves of oyster shells once found here, we enter the commercial spine of the town. The scene is one of controlled chaos. The street itself is a thick paste of mud and refuse, churned by wooden wheels and the hooves of draft animals. The buildings are a mix of Dutch, urban, and frontier practicality. Tall, narrow brick houses with stepped gable facades stand beside simpler wooden structures with thatched roofs. Their colors are not the bright hues of Amsterdam, but weathered browns, reds, and off-whites. From open doorways and cellar hatches comes the sound of commerce, the clink of coins, the arguing over prices in a dozen languages. This is where merchants like Govert Lukkermans and Olaf Stevenson van Cortlandt operated. We can see there. Homes part residence, part warehouse, part tavern. Look up, and you'll notice many houses have large hoisting beams jutting from their attics. Used to haul goods from the street, a signature of Dutch design transplanted to this new world. One of the most striking features recreated here by AI from original plans is the network of canals. The most prominent is the Heere Gracht, or Gentleman's Canal, where Broad Street is today. It's not the romantic waterway of Venice, but a functional, smelly trench for drainage and transport. Small, flat-bottomed boats pull along it, carrying goods from the harbor inland. The canal's edges are lined with more modest homes and workshops. The smell is potent, a mixture of stagnant water, human waste, and the tannery's acrid punch. Yet, these canals represent the colonists' desperate attempt to impose the familiar geometry of the Netherlands onto the wild, uneven topography of Manhattan. They are symbols of ambition and identity, even as they became notorious health hazards. This reconstruction allows us to see the town not as a static drawing, but as a living, breathing, and sometimes stinking organism. Walking north, the dense town gradually thins. The wooden palisade from which Wall Street gets its name comes into view. It's a stark, simple barrier, sharpened logs lashed together, about 12 feet high. On this side, the ordered world of the Dutch, on the other, the vast, dense forest of the island and the continent beyond. Sentries walk aboard. Patrol. The wall was built out of fear, following the devastating Peachtree War, a conflict with the indigenous Lenape, but it was also porous. Native traders came through its gates to barter, and farmers ventured out to their boweries, or farms. Standing at this fragile boundary, you feel the profound isolation and vulnerability of this settlement. The wilderness feels immense, pressing in, while the Atlantic Ocean, the only link to home and authority, feels impossibly far away. Beyond the landmarks, it's the people that define this AI-recreated moment. The population was only about 1,500 souls, but it was arguably the most diverse community in North America. We see not just Dutch burghers, but African men and women, both enslaved and free, who helped build the fort and clear the land. We see Sephardic Jewish families seeking refuge from persecution. We see English farmers from New England and Scandinavians working as sailors. The chatter on the street is a cacophony of tongues. The clothing is a mix of worn work shirts, elaborate lace collars on the wealthy, and the practical leather garments. Of traders, the atmosphere is one of relentless work and simmering tension, but also of incredible possibility. For many, this muddy outpost was a chance to start anew, a promise that often went unfulfilled but forever altered their destinies. Our time in this reconstruction must acknowledge the inevitable end. The year is 1664. The atmosphere in the fort is one of anxious defiance. Director General Stuyvesant, his wooden leg tapping impatiently, knows an English fleet is gathering. The company has underfunded the colony. The walls are weak, and the diverse population feels little loyalty to the distant Dutch Republic. When 4 English frigates finally sail into the harbor and train their guns on the town, the outcome is a foregone conclusion. Without a single shot fired in anger, the Articles of Surrender are signed. New Amsterdam becomes New York. What's remarkable is not the conquest, but what remained: the street grid, the property laws, the spirit of mercantile hustle, and the foundational DNA of diversity and tolerance, however imperfect, persisted beneath the new English rule. So, what have we witnessed by stepping into this AI past? We've seen not a quaint village, but a raw, ambitious, and fraught proto-city, a place where global forces of empire and commerce collided on a narrow island. The cobblestones of Pearl Street, the forgotten path of the Heere Gracht, the defensive line of the Wall, these ghosts are buried beneath the steel and concrete of modern Manhattan. Standing here today at the corner of, say, Broadway and Wall Street, it's impossible not to feel the layers. The dreams of the West India Company for profit, the strivings of those first colonists for a better life, the profound injustice inflicted on enslaved Africans and displaced Lenape. Of this was the bedrock. New Amsterdam was not just a failed Dutch colony. It was the volatile, messy, brilliant first draft of New York City. If you could witness any moment in history firsthand, what would it be? Let me know in the comments. Your suggestions fuel these journeys back in time. Thank you for joining me. In this reconstruction of Dutch New Amsterdam, remember to look beneath the modern skyline. The past is always there, waiting to be seen.